So Marvel is gearing up and starting what they claim to be their bloodiest Marvel event yet, called Bloodhunt. And if you can't tell, the theme focus is vampires attacking and conquering the entire planet, all the way down from Spider-Man in New York to Doctor Doom in Latveria. Not only will the Avengers need help and even may die, but even powerful beings like Scarlet Witch or Doctor Strange may not be able to survive. Now, my name is AJ, here at the Hero Informer, and let's get into it. So we immediately pick up in the midst of it with Scarlet Witch and Iron Man responding to a distress call. A distress call because a villain named Blackout literally exploded, with his body becoming a portal of sorts, just gushing out dark energy. And why is this? Well, because he was a Dark Force user. And if you don't know, in the Marvel Universe, multiple people, or Dark Force users, are connected to the Dark Force dimension, a dimension filled with pure Dark Force energy, which certain heroes and villains can manipulate this energy to use for different abilities, such as Cloak with his teleporting. But of course, if Scarlet Witch comes and sees this one, it is reported that this is happening all over the globe, with multiple Dark Force users. Not just multiple, but all of them exploding and their powers going haywire. And for what reason? Well, what is one thing vampires love the most except blood? Darkness. If vampires were to run rampant, they couldn't do it with the sun shining out, burning them. So somehow, they've organized together and crafted a plan to black out the sun from the entire Earth, meaning the Earth is plunged into eternal darkness, in which this comic calls it the sun death. And a major event like this causes absolute chaos and destruction around the globe, as something like this would, as we even see a little montage and countdown of multiple Dark Force users suddenly succumbing to whatever force is causing their powers to mess up and go haywire, causing them to explode, plunging the world into darkness. And of course, with the world now in darkness, the vampires attack, as we see multiple places on Earth, from Italy, Nigeria, Canada, chaos ensuing with vampires running rampant, killing and or turning all people they can find. And this happens all around the globe, every continent, even bringing it to Latveria, as we see vampires chasing people to the borders, but as soon as they get in, they're burned, as Doctor Doom is no slouch and has his borders secure. And I'm really interested to see how Doctor Doom will play into this whole event, and if he will either shut himself off to the rest of the world, or even try to help the heroes stop this vampire invasion. Moving over though, we go back to New York, where we see Spider-Man, specifically Miles Morales, dealing with problems and vampires of his own, literally stabbing him with his electric venom weapon construct into the form of a blade or a saber. And as he takes down a vampire, he says, what will Blade do in this situation? And lucky for him, Blade shows up, saying that is a good question, isn't it? Things are looking bad, Spider-Man, but I have got a plan, and I've got something for you to do too. And of course, as you know, Blade is a vampire hunter, but he also is a vampire himself. So just keep that in the back of your head for a little later. Going forward though, we see an hour after this whole invasion started, even the Avengers are having a hard time keeping up with just the amount of enemies there are. Thousands or even millions of vampires attacking them from all angles, non-stopping, because the vampires are even stronger under the darkness of night. And now with the entire planet being in a internal darkness, it is not looking good for the superhero community. And also, they had no knowledge of this. They were just thrust into the situation blind, with them trying to make hypothesis of what is going on. Even Captain America saying, I don't know, but this doesn't feel like the work of Dracula. It's outside of his trajectory. But as they are in the middle of talking, suddenly they get an alert, and it is exactly who they will want it to be on a day like this. It is Blade, telling the Avengers that he is on the run, but he has information and they need to meet now, as we see him driving a very specific truck. So keep this in mind. He then tells the Avengers to lock onto his coordinates and teleport him up to the Impossible City, which is basically a giant floating city slash ship in space. And as the Avengers finally teleport up, we see Captain Marvel say we have to make this quick, because every second they appear, people down on Earth are getting slaughtered and or turned into vampires. With Thor even going on to say, they have the numbers and we do not have the time, at least not without the sun. And unfortunately for the Avengers, this may be the last time some of them are even alive, as something really crazy happens just now. As you cut over and see the truck that Blade was driving teleport up into the space station with the Avengers, coming to a screeching halt. And with this all being very confusing, Captain Marvel then approaches the truck saying, yo Blade, what is even going on? But just then, everybody on the ship clutches their head in pain as a mind-shattering psychic attack hits. And believe me, it must be pretty powerful if it can incapacitate the likes of Thor and Scarlet Witch, both who have pretty good mental defenses. But who are the culprits behind this? Well, we cut over to see the Blood Claven, these nightmare-inducing creatures, with each one of them looking like they could be out of a horror film. But we then see the giant pale one, whose name is Bloodstorm 1, say, my warriors have been waiting for this. As you see, this isn't just a random group of villains, no. They've been prepared. They've been planning for this. training. Each one of these members are not only a vampire, but also were brought on because they directly counter one of the Avengers. And you might say, okay, well, they countered the Avengers, but they're still vampires, right? The Avengers can handle some vampire villains. Well, no, these are not any ordinary vampires. They are super vampires. So you know how vampires feast on human blood? The super vampires feast on superhuman blood, making them exponentially stronger than your average vampire, say attacking a normal human. So the Avengers are in for a tough and rough time. But we actually get some names for these new faces. With Megrum being the one doing the psychic static, we also have a creature named Cruel, who looks to be wrapped in metal razor wiring. Then we have another one named Unusual. Then we have Damascene and Smoke Eater. Each of these creatures' powers directly counter one or two of the Avengers. And as their leader, whose name is Bloodstorm 1, gives them their targets, the battle then starts, with Smoke Eater inhaling some kind of smoke or ghost as his powers allow him to transform depending on which spirits he ingests. We see the fight immediately start, with the creature named Unusual taking Scarlet Witch, the creature named Damascene slashing at super speeds, cutting Thor. And keep in mind, this is no small feat of power. Some people might say Thor has bad piercing durability, but no average person, you or I, could take a knife and just cut Thor. No, you need something stronger than that. With their leader even going on to say, the Damascene can cut anything, Thunder God, be it Asgardian flesh or intangible synthezoid molecules, as we see it effortlessly throw a spear cutting through vision. And with Iron Man now joining the fold, saying we'll see about that, before he is able to even do anything, suddenly his whole suit shuts down, as the metal wiring creature named Cruel gets a hold of him. Now, Cruel is kind of interesting because even though he looks like he's just wires, it also seems that he has some kind of control over technology, which I could be wrong, but I'm just making an observation. And Iron Man falls to the ground in pain with his suit shutting down. The Avengers are getting picked off one by one, with Captain Marvel still struggling against a psychic hold, before then getting beat down by Smoke Eater, who is now transformed into a beastier form. We then see their leader, Bloodstorm 1, attack the leader of the Avengers, Captain America, with the creature doing this purposefully, saying, Captain America, you I particularly want. You will be a fine prize for the master when I turn you. You'll be our symbol, and then your species will weep. Just showing you that even though these 6 creatures are powerful, none of these creatures are the mastermind on this whole invasion. There's still someone else above them, who we might even see later. But again, the Avengers try their best to survive this encounter, as we see the Unusual One. His counter to Scarlet Witch is he can absorb energy and magic, so anything Scarlet Witch does with her chaos magic is almost futile and is powering the creature up. And believe me when I tell you, it's looking like a slaughter out here for the Avengers. Tony's suit being compromised and him still on the ground, Thor being all cut up and bleeding, with him even saying, "You may cut me, monster, but you cannot turn me and you cannot kill me," which bad choice of words from Thor, as Cruel then says, "Kill you? What a waste. We want to keep you." As we see Damascene throw one of its spiky appendages, cutting straight through Thor's head, looking like this would be almost certain death for the God of Thunder, taking him out of the fight and putting him down for now. And for as if he is actually dead, we don't know. Moving over, we see Bloodstorm 1, their leader, approach Captain America and Black Panther as they are on the floor hurt, and with Black Panther telling the city, who has some sentience, to teleport and dimension shift, the city says it is unable to, as we see Cruel using its abilities to somehow compromise the ship's technology and stop it from teleporting away. As Captain America gets back up, saying they've thought of everything, didn't they? But Black Panther has a plan in mind, as he says not quite, and charges for them, using himself as a distraction as he then emergency evacuates the rest of the Avengers, teleporting them back to Earth down below, much to their dismay. As Captain America is the first one to be teleported, we see Bloodstorm plunge his fist through T'Challa, seemingly killing him on the spot. But the Avengers cannot even avenge their teammate, as the ship is in the middle of teleporting them away. And with Black Panther's seemingly last words being, "Can't let them have the symbol, because the world will need a symbol," referring to Captain America and keeping him alive above all else. As the Avengers teleport away, much to the rage of the leader of these vampire creatures, with the only ones being left behind being Black Panther's body, Thor still on the ground cut from being stabbed through the head, and Scarlet Witch, who is in some kind of bubble or prison. And not only was this a humiliating defeat for the Avengers, but this went the worst way possible that it could have. All of them are hurt and damaged, and they even lost half of their squad without even doing any damage to the vampire creatures. But shifting our focus over, we pick up at the Sanctum Sanctor with Doctor Strange and his wife Clea hard at work trying to find a spell or some magic that could end all of this chaos. And if they can assemble it, they can kill every vampire on Earth instantaneously. ending this entire conflict at the snap of a finger. But just then, Blade enters the Sanctum Sanctor and arrives, saying, "That's an interesting idea, Doc, but don't you need the Darkhold for that? And last I heard, the Scarlet Witch has eaten and merged with it." But just then, Blade decides to drop some lore about what is happening. You see, the vampires and everybody involved call themselves the Structure. They are a vampire cult that was spreading across the world before their leader was killed by Moon Knight. But unfortunately, the Structure found new leadership, and new leadership with a plan. You see, this new leader had 3 goals and 3 steps. Step 1. Use Atlantean rituals to detonate Dark Force users and turn them into portals to block out the sun. Step 2. Global uprising. Mobilizing legions of mass-turned maniacs and vampires all across the globe, striking at population centers. And Step 3. Taking out the Avengers and other superhero heavy hitters. And as we saw before, the Blood Coven were definitely a match for the Avengers, especially with them being handpicked for certain weaknesses against them. And now with this new pressing news, Doctor Strange then says, "It is more important than ever that we assemble the formula for the spell." And with Blade now being suspicious, saying, "Would you really do that? Kill every vampire on Earth? Some of them are even on your side, aren't they?" Because keep in mind, Blade is a vampire himself, so if this spell was to go off, yeah, a lot of the bad vampires would die, but so would all of the good ones too. And with Doctor Strange simply saying, "I am a doctor. If I must cut away a limb to save the patient, I will do it. I will accept my own damnation to save the world, my patient." But of course, Doctor Strange wants more information. He then goes on to ask Blade a bunch more questions, saying, "You've mentioned a new leader for the Structure. Who is the mastermind? Is it Dracula?" Blade says, "No, nothing like that." But as Strange continues to work and ask, he turns his head, asking more questions, saying, "Do you know who put out the sun? Who released the Children of the Night? Who assembled the monsters that killed the Avengers? And who is the leader of the Structure?" And in an absolutely shocking twist, Blade says it's me. He is the leader of the Structure while stabbing Strange through the chest with a blade, presumably killing him on the spot. As it seems, Blade has turned against humanity as he is the leader of the Structure and the cause of this entire vampire chaos in the first place. And obviously seeing her loved one being murdered by the hands of a so-called friend doesn't sit right with her, nor would it with anyone. We see her get into battle mode, screaming at Blade to let him go, with Blade going on to say, "No, fear not, I have no intention of letting him die, or at least not for long," as we see Blade plunge his fangs into Doctor Strange's neck, infecting him to become a undead vampire just like him and many others, with Clea going on the offense to cast a spell wanting to stop them, but her spell is the one that stopped, as somehow Blade is able to cast a countermeasure. To her surprise, with her saying, "How are you doing this? You, Blade, are no mage," because as it seems, Blade, the vampire hunter, is now well versed in Atlantean magic and sorcery. And with Blade now infecting Doctor Strange, he then lunges and rushes for Clea to start their very own battle. And as they come to clash, magic versus his blades, this surprises Clea as she says, "What manner of swords even are those?" Blade then goes on to say, long ago in old Atlantis, there is an Atlantean order of people who hunted magicians. They forged and made blades that can even kill the most powerful of sorcerers, cutting through their enchantments. Now of course they died, but their blades remain. And of course as their battle continues, they eventually come to a standstill, face to face, within a sword clash, with Clea going on to say, "Why, Blade? Steven was your friend. You even battled evil vampires together, helping each other out." Blade then goes on to say, well, his plan, his scheme, has spanned and has been in the works for a long time. The end has been in the making for thousands of years. Loosing his hungry children across the world, shattering the Avengers, was merely his opening move. No, to make lasting order and to achieve his long desired aims, the Earth's sorcerers, and Sorcerer Supreme specifically, must be dealt with. Because yeah, you know how many other events or stories where it is like, oh, the Avengers were defeated, how will the heroes prevail? And then the heroes mount up another attack and they wind up winning. No, if you want true change and want to win, not only do you have to deal with the Avengers, but also other magic users, time travelers, speedsters, and so on. With Blade also saying the reasoning why he did this to Doctor Strange in the first place was so that they couldn't put together the Montestel formula, the spell or formula that could instantly wipe out all vampires on Earth, putting Blade's plan to a screeching halt. But of course now with Clea knowing this, she then tells Blade that you have sealed your fate, for Steven and I will not rest until we have assembled the formula and defeated you. With Blade going on to say, oh yeah, I believe you. If I left Stephen Strange alive, you would. And even if I killed him, your grief would only encourage you more. But instead, I've left you with a very convincing argument not to do it. As you then see Doctor Strange in the corner, with him finally starting his process into becoming a vampire himself. And what does this mean? Well, if Clea wants to keep keep her beloved husband, the one person she loves most in the world, alive now, she can't put together the spell and cast it. Because yeah, it might save the world and get rid of the vampires, but it'll also now get rid of Doctor Strange himself too, which is the exact angle Blade was working at, with Doctor Strange getting up and rushing towards Clea trying to attack her. So she is forced to use the Crimson Bands of Sidorak to restrain him, as Blade is now free to fully leave, as his mission is now completed. But of course, Clea vows to see him dead, to kill him for what he has done to not only Strange, but to the entire Earth. As Blade says, perhaps, but it will not be the first time I have died, as he then calls upon his blood coven to teleport him back to base, leaving Clea to deal with this now vampire Doctor Strange. And as they engage in a little bit of a struggle, she then comes to a realization and conclusion, saying that the Daywalker, or Blade, has turned you into a vampire, making you susceptible to his dominion, but it is only a curse of your body, and while it has clouded your mind, she can separate the two. And while telling him to brace himself because this process will hurt, she literally reaches in and pulls his soul out of his body, separating the normal human Stephen Strange from the vampire body of Stephen Strange. And with Doctor Strange immediately being distraught over losing his body, and I mean, yeah, you obviously would, right? Imagine being forcefully turned into a vampire against your will, and not even just a normal vampire, a feral beast vampire. Yeah, that would suck for anybody, let alone a vampire with the magic of the Sorcerer Supreme. But just then, Doctor Strange immediately locks in and decides they still need to go ahead with the formula, even though it would kill him now that his body's a vampire too. And of course his wife Clea doesn't want this, with her even saying there has to be another way, as she then goes on to explain that Blade attacked us, beat us, because we were doing what he knew we would be doing, and because we were blind to the true threat. But now our eyes have been torn open. We cannot win by what he expects us to do, which would be scrambling to put together the spell, all while he and the other vampires continue taking over the earth. She continues by saying, we must save the world and you. There is no in-between or picking and choosing. And eventually Doctor Strange gives in, saying, alright, fine, but if we hope to win, we must join forces with the other heroes. Blade believes us to be broken and scattered, and it is up to us to show him how wrong he is. And just like that, right on cue, they then start to hear knocks on their front door of the Sanctum Sanctor, as we immediately cut over and see who is at the front door. Spider-Man, specifically Miles Morales, Tigra, and Hunter's Moon. And after peering out in his now ghostly form, Doctor Strange then welcomes them inside the Sanctum Sanctor. And here is where things get really juicy again, as we see a shocking twist. Somebody starts talking and monologuing, with him going on to say, the heroes gather, and now they make their plans to save the day. For I speak quite literally this time. With unnatural darkness having fallen upon the earth, they must truly save the day. But they don't know that I am in this story as well. And it is almost time for me to make my entrance. Me, Victor Strange, a ghost, a mind without a body, and look, a body without a mind. As you see another ghost and or astral form peer out, and it is none other than Victor Strange, the brother of Dr. Stephen Strange, who most people probably didn't even know existed. Dr. Strange also had a sister too, but she is largely unimportant, or at least not as important as Victor Strange here might become. But as his ghost form is here, he also sees there is an uninhabited body in the form of Doctor Strange's vampire body. So if these two were to somehow connect, an evil Victor Strange and the powerful body of the Sorcerer Supreme, all hell might break loose. As considering the fact that before Victor Strange was turned into a spirit, he was accidentally turned into a vampire himself, meaning if he gets a hold of the Sorcerer Supreme's powerful body, he will help the enemy vampires continue dominating the earth. So immediately setting the stage, we pick up in the Impossible City, a floating spacecraft above Earth, where we see Thor bound and bleeding, Scarlet Witch mentally damaged and her powers drained, with Blade monologuing and talking to the heroes, or should I say now defeated heroes, while looking over the earth, saying we are secure here in this wondrous impossible city, which these monsters or vampires call home. And as a new monster, how do you feel? And who is he talking to? Well, he is talking to none other than a vampirified T'Challa, or the Black Panther, who along with the other Avengers were beat and some even turned, as you see T'Challa is here. But of course, with Blade now being the self-proclaimed Lord of all vampires, Black Panther is helpless to fight against the vampire control. And so with that, Blade then sends his elite team of super vampires, called the Blood Coven, off to go find his prized possession, his daughter. And now cutting over to the streets of New York, we see Blade's daughter doing what she does best. As you know, being the daughter of the famous or infamous Blade, the vampire hunter, means she is pretty well versed in defeating vampires. But we also see that she isn't alone, as she is traveling with Dracula, who, contrary to who you might think, is not on Team Vampire Invasion. No, he's against it, and he is against Blade. But just then, a third party enters the battlefield once more, causing them to turn around, and it is the elite team known as the Blood Coven. 6 elite members and super vampires with unique and powerful abilities. Prior were able to best the Avengers. Some of the members include Bloodstorm 1, the giant white fella with wings on his head. Now this one is a basic super vampire. Super strength, super durability, the whole 9 yards, and gets more powerful with more blood he ingests. Next, we see one that looks like they have a halo above their head. Megrim. Now her power is basically an alternate version of telepathy. She can scramble and hurt people using her mind, which can even affect beings on the like of Scarlet Witch. Next, we see one wrapped in razor named Cruel, which it may seem obvious what he can do with razor sharp wires, but he also seems like some kind of technopath, able to affect and damage powerful technology, including Iron Man's new Mysterium armor. Then we have the crystal looking one named Damascene. His body and talons are so sharp, it can even cut the toughest of beings. Next, we have Smoke Eater, and they can basically turn into different forms depending on what kind of ghost or spirits they ingest. And last but not least, we have Unusual, who seems like some kind of energy vampire, absorbing, feeding, and redirecting energy. Again, who is strong enough to even contend with the chaos magic of the Scarlet Witch. And as Dracula gears up ready to fight and defend against these vampires, or super vampires, suddenly there is another intrusion, and it is none other this time than the Earth's mightiest heroes, the Avengers, albeit a few members short. But we still have some powerful heavy hitters, with the team consisting of Sam Wilson, Captain America, Iron Man, Captain Marvel, and The Vision. And with that, their battle starts. But of course, these two teams have already fought, meaning the Avengers, who before were blindsided and got beat pretty badly, are now prepared, as Vision, flying at super speeds, immediately flies, swooping down, grabbing the telepath, whooshing her away. And of course, with him being an android, he can scramble his brain patterns too fast for her to even use her abilities effectively. And so where does he take her? Well, he takes her a couple miles up above the dark clouds surrounding the Earth, straight into the sunlight. And yeah, right now Earth is covered with thick, black, mystical energy called the Dark Force, meaning Earth is getting no sunlight. So the vampires are, of course, free to roam the entire Earth. But moving back over to the battlefield, we see Captain Marvel decking Bloodstorm 1, or the leader of the super vampire team, as the other Avenger members start to lay the beatdown on the Blood Coven. A complete 180 from the tragedy and massacre that was before, because the Avengers had time to plan and prepare, meaning even though they weren't able to beat them the first time, they sure are going to avenge their fallen teammates. And now to add even more insult to injury, we see Vision do something game-changing, because you see, obviously Vision is an android, and part of his abilities, he can absorb solar energy, so he flies back onto the field filled with the sun. And if you thought this was a one-sided beatdown before, it is absolutely over now, as the Vision is now filled with the vampire's #1 weakness, sunlight and solar energy. And yeah, speaking of solar energy, I just want to bring up a moment I think is pretty funny. When a vampire tried to bite Superman, but found in his blood, every cell was filled with the solar radiation and energy, meaning Superman is naturally the vampire's worst nightmare. But we then see Captain Marvel continue to sweep house, knocking all of the villains into each other, but then in a show of power using her energy blast, she shoots up into the sky, into the black dark force energy surrounding the planet, piercing it and letting sunlight come through, with her even saying, even at half strength, we are still the Avengers. And that means no matter how dark the night gets, we will make sure that the sun will always rise again. As all the Avengers plus Dracula and Daughter of Blade all stand in formation, ready to continue the battle. But of course, these cowardly villains open a portal and start to retreat, with the leader, Bloodstorm, saying fall back, we'll get them next time. Next time will be for everything, as there's a little theme going on. Because the first time, the super vampires completely dominated the Avengers, causing them to retreat, but now the Avengers came back and beat them even harder. And now the super vampires are going to retreat, and maybe next time, using the captured Avengers, Thor, Scarlet Witch, and the Black Panther, might even be able to put the hurt on the Avengers even more. But of course, the Blood Coven all escape, with Captain Marvel even promising that we'll get them back. We'll get the Impossible City back, and we will save our captured friends. But for now, they need teammates and reinforcements, and to get a grip on the entire worldwide catastrophe and situation, as they cut over and go to the Sanctum Sanctor, where we see Doctor Strange, who is currently stuck in his astral form because his physical body was infected by Blade himself and is now a vampire. And as the Avengers make their way through the Sanctum Sanctor, they meet up with a few other heroes, namely Spider-Man, specifically Miles Morales, Hunter's Moon, who is basically a different Moon Knight, and Tigra, who all met up separately trying to quell and get reinforcements for this vampire invasion themselves. Because as you know, this is a worldwide threat, meaning every villain and hero are dealing with this all the same. So right now the heroes have a pretty stacked roster, which includes Doctor Strange, Dracula, and the Daughter of Blade, who apparently knows Miles. And as she gets there, she says, Spider-Man, finally somebody I know. Listen, with all this going down, I can't find my dad. But just then, something crazy happens. Miles then starts gripping his head in utter pain and shock as something terrible has happened along the way, causing Spider-Man to vampire out, as Miles then transforms into a vampire himself, ripping his mask, revealing his dark red eyes and vampire fangs. Which not only is this crazy in itself, but he turned right here in the middle of all the other heroes. And seeing as someone with spider powers, if he is able to act fast enough, he can possibly infect many of the other heroes that are present. But for now, we move back over to where Blade is, on the Impossible City, a floating spacecraft above Earth, which Blade is using for his new vampire headquarters, where we see him talking to T'Challa, or the Black Panther, who is not only a vampire himself now, but is under Blade's absolute control, with Blade ordering T'Challa to use Wakanda's mass translocation device to bring something to him, which is basically a giant teleporter. So keep this in mind, because at the end, this comes back and does something crazy. And while he is in the middle of conversation with T'Challa, someone behind him speaks up, and it is none other than Wanda, the Scarlet Witch, who is imprisoned by the powers of one of the Blood Coven, the team of super vampires I mentioned before. With her going on to say, "Congratulations, Blade, it would appear you have gotten everything you've wanted, and yet I cannot notice that the Blood Coven have returned one member short." As in the previous part, the Avengers led a counterattack against the super vampires and even killed one of its members, and wounding the team, as you see them trying to feast on the blood of Thor, because as vampires they get stronger with more blood they ingest, and what next level can you even go than the blood of a thunder god? As Scarlet Witch continues going on to say, "Yeah, you struck fast and you struck true. We never saw it coming, because in their first battle, there was a sneak attack and the Avengers fell. But now the Avengers' eyes are open, and when that gaze falls on you again, you will wither." As ironically enough, we cut over to see where the Avengers are now, at the Sanctum Sanctor, where we see Spider-Man infected with the same vampire curse, now launching off to attack his teammates and fellow heroes. But before he is able to do any damage, Vision grabs him from behind. But Miles uses his Venom Blast to shock Vision jumping off of him, which I mean, I would think Vision would be more powerful than Spider-Man's Venom Blast, but maybe it's just a bad matchup, seeing how electricity and technology aren't always a good fit. But before Spider-Man is able to do any more attacks, suddenly he is restrained by the Crimson Bands of Sidorak. Because it is not just the Avengers here, no, it is also Doctor Strange and his wife Clea, who quickly came up with countermeasures in case anybody got turned, with Doctor Strange throwing the Eye of Agamotto at Spider-Man, and this seemingly curing him of his bloodlust. But unfortunately, he is still a vampire. He just now has the clarity of mind to not randomly attack his teammates and friends, but still a vampire nonetheless. But of course, Doctor Strange tells Spider-Man not to worry, as he isn't the only one that has been turned to a vampire. As you see, Doctor Strange is currently in his astral form, because his natural body is still a blood-seeking vampire. And oh yeah, I have yet to mention, but also Dracula himself and the daughter of Blade are here too. Because in this time of peril, the Avengers are just recruiting anybody and needing all the help they can get. But as Blade's daughter speaks up, confused about all of this, because she knows nothing of what is going on and her father's true purpose. So Dracula, who brought her along, goes on to say, "I have brought you along, child, to save the world. You must strike down your father, the new lord of the vampires, Blade." And of course, to her absolute shock, Dracula continues to say, "Blade has loosened his legions of the night all across the world, and he is the one who has engineered the darkening of the skies. He has broke the mighty Avengers, and now you're all that's left to stop him. For you, as his bloodline, represents his only weakness, and only your hand can strike him down." But as he finished talking, the heroes then say, "Are we really supposed to believe you? That you're just on our side now?" Because of course, during a vampire invasion, would you really trust Dracula, the previous ruler of all vampires? But of course, Dracula goes on to defend himself, saying, "That is exactly what you're supposed to believe, because it is the truth. My vampire nation was precisely that, a nation, one that will fall all the same if all the other human nations don't stop Blade." But of course, as they are talking and arguing, the kid, the daughter of Blade, just leaves and runs off, which is obviously bad for two reasons. One, it is absolute chaos out there, and even though she is skilled in specifically hunting vampires, she's not invincible and can get herself killed. And two, she is seemingly the key to stopping Blade, so if the heroes want to win, they desperately need her help. And so with that, Dracula and Spider-Man rocket off to go after her, because Miles specifically is a friend of hers. And this plot though will pick up in Miles' own book, which we will cover on this channel very soon. So hey, if you want to watch that too, subscribe and put on post notifications to stay tuned. But as those two people depart, the rest of the heroes then depart on their own, as they make smaller teams that each have their own mission. So they split into 3 groups. Doctor Strange and his wife need to go somewhere to find aid and help in the magical sense, with the Midnight Mission being Tigra and this new Fist of Khonshu going somewhere where they can raise an army that Blade and the vampires cannot kill, cannot turn, and cannot terrify. But the remaining Avengers, they decide they need to handle Blade himself and the Blood Coven, but they need to draw him out into the open for them to even attack. So as everybody else teleports away and departs, the Avengers then come up with a new plan. You see, they can kill 2 birds at once. Not only do they need to draw Blade out, but but they can also give the world hope. Tell everyone that they're not alone and they can't give up. So they decide, in Captain Marvel specifically, to broadcast into every system and satellite across the globe to get this message out, with Iron Man hacking in and setting up the broadcast. But of course, then the question of who is going to do it comes up, and Captain Marvel wants this team's Captain America to do it. Because as she says, this is exactly what T'Challa saved you for. Because if you remember in the first part, Bloodstorm 1, the leader of the Blood Coven vampire team, was going to attack and possibly kill Captain America. But T'Challa saved him, saying can't let the vampires have the symbol, because the world will need a symbol. Which of course plays into here, as he will now be the symbol of hope during this dark time to inspire this world. And because of this, Sam accepts, as the cameras start rolling and a broadcast is sent out. He even goes on to say, I am Sam Wilson, Captain America, speaking for the Avengers. Things are bad, I know, but we have been here before. And we're still here now. The world has seen evil time and time again. Aliens, monsters, tyrants, and madmen. And every time we the people of Earth told them no. Sam Wilson then goes on to name some of the atrocities and invasions that they have had in the past. From war-bound aliens, to Null himself, to Hydra, to even Galactus. And every time the heroes and people of Earth have told them no and rise above the threats. And as he is speaking, we see a couple things of note happen. Firstly, we see where the heroes went off to, with the little Midnight Mission team going to Asgard to retrieve help, and Doctor Strange and his wife going to Latveria, which could be very interesting in the future, but we'll see how that pans out. We also see T'Challa or the Black Panther in the undergrounds of Wakanda doing Blade's bidding and whatever he is planning. And speaking of Blade, we see him on the Impossible City, very angry that this broadcast is even going out. But as Captain America continues, he says, we are still here and we will win, like we have won all those times before. Just hold on until the sun shines again, because it will. And this broadcast is successful for two reasons. One, it not only inspires hope for the people of the world, but it also succeeded in angering Blade, causing him to want to find out and attack the Avengers. But little does he know he is playing right into their trap, as you could over and see him absolutely seething at the thought of the Avengers winning, with him yelling to T'Challa, things have changed. Retarget the mass translocation device and bring something to New York. Because as Blade goes on to say, your friends have decided that they will not simply lie down and die. And I cannot have that, not when my triumph is at hand. We then move over and see Central Park, New York City. Blade going on to further say, from the caves of Wakanda to New York City, which will serve as a grave of the Avengers, I will drop my greatest prize, which has not seen the sky since the old days of Atlantis, so that it might be their tombstone. As you see a wormhole or a portal open up, and out comes some giant looking object. An object which is rightfully ominous and called the Temple of the First Blasphemy, which I mean just by the name alone and looking at it, this can obviously be nothing good. As the giant monstrosity of a temple looms over New York, seemingly crashing down. And while this is happening, we see a narrator speak and go over the affairs of current Earth, saying it would appear that things are going very badly. The Avengers broken, the Sorcerer Supreme an apparition, and New York City with an ancient Atlantean temple as a part of its skyline. But I suppose things must really be going badly if you have come to me for help. Well, it is none other than Doctor Doom himself. As you see, the Avengers and other heroes came to Doctor Doom for help, which is crazy enough as it is, as Doom would be the last person you will want help from, because any help you do get from him is always a two-sided coin. Yeah, you may receive help and get whatever you need to be done, but Doom first and foremost always has his own goals and plans in mind. Moving over though, we actually pick up inside of the First Blasphemy, which is, as I said before, a giant temple of Atlantean origin, and inside we see Blade and his entire vampire team, including the now turned vampire Black Panther, with Blade, or this person who seems like Blade, going on to say, do you know how long it's been since I walked these stones? When we first built it, you should have seen it. But Black Panther himself finally starts to realize something isn't as it seems, with him going on to ask him, you're not really Blade, are you? And Blade, I say in quotations, goes on to say, no, I am something much greater, and I will become something greater still. This has always been the plan, you see. Thousands of years ago, what began as a crime against the universe will now see completion. And with Black Panther being fed up with not the full story or truth, he then yells out, what are you? And here's where everything becomes clear and a realization happens. As you see, this isn't Blade, no, this is Verne, the first ever vampire in Marvel history, dating thousands of years back before the age of humans that we have now even begun. With this now Blade imposter going on to further say and explain, he is the first vampire, but his nomad spirit is clothed inside of the fated vessel, or Blade's body. But of course now we move back over to Latveria, where we see Doctor Doom come to the same conclusion, that no, it is not Blade who is leading this vampire invasion and battle, but it is Verne, the first and ancient powerful vampire just inhabiting his body. But Doctor Strange, who was there with his wife meeting with Doctor Doom, Strange goes on to say, and yet your borders are free of vampires. Because of course, Dr. Doom has taken precautions to not only protect his land, but his people. And as we will find out, Doom is anything but unprepared. As you see, Doom is really what a lot of people think Batman is. Or I should say it as this: Doom takes Batman's notion of prep time and turns it up to dial 11. As you see, not only is he a master of technology and science, but also magic, something that Batman doesn't really dabble into, and even without the constraints of being a hero or having some kind of moral dilemma. As you see, Dr. Doom is willing to make those hard decisions and choices if it means securing his goals. But continuing on, Dr. Strange goes on to say, "The skies, Victor. We must have the sun again if we have any hope for victory. I am asking for your help with the Dark Force, which is currently coating the entire Earth, blocking any sunlight from getting in and halting the vampire invasion." But of course, as I said before, Doom is prepared, as he goes on to let Dr. Strange know, "I have precautions for that as well." Of course, it was only a matter of time after all. But then they start to get into the specifics about what they need magic-wise to revert this kind of event, as Dr. Doom then goes on to explain a great assemblage of mages to begin with. A grand array of magical creatures brought together as one is what is required. And as Dr. Strange goes, "Okay, that's pretty easy. I am quite acquainted with many great magicians." But as you see, Dr. Doom is prepared for this too, as he already took the liberty of preparing his own team. A team that Dr. Strange himself knows all too well, as it is a team of magical beings from Dr. Strange's own magic school, the Strange Academy. And as it seems, Dr. Doom has it all figured out. But there is one thing he doesn't have yet that Dr. Strange has a pivotal role in producing. As you see, Dr. Doom then goes on to say, "Now Stephen, give it to me and let us begin." But of course, Dr. Strange is unclear and doesn't follow, as Victor Von Doom goes to clarify, saying, "I should think you would understand. This is an extraordinary work of magic, and to enact it, I must become the Sorcerer Supreme." Meaning if Doctor Strange and the other heroes want Doom's help in helping repel this invasion, Doctor Strange himself must relinquish the title of Sorcerer Supreme and any power and magic that comes with it to none other than Doctor Doom, which would elevate Doom to a higher status than he already is. But if you remember from the last issue, as Doctor Strange and his wife went to Latveria, Tigra and Hunter's Moon went to Asgard, as they themselves are seeking out an army to help repel against the vampires. And as it would seem, this is a smash and grab type of mission, or a prison break, as they are sneaking into the Asgardian dungeons to break someone free, and they even brought along a third person, and it is none other than the Wrecker. And who he is really isn't important, as he is really a C-lister or even D-list villain, but all you need to know about him is he is somewhat strong and likes wrecking and breaking things open. But as you see the trio walk up to the giant chamber holding this mysterious and powerful person, we see Hunter's Moon refer to this person as father, and who even this might be a little bit of a surprise. But for now though, we move back over to the temple where Blade and his vampire team are currently stationed at, where we still see two of the Avengers who were defeated and imprisoned, Scarlet Witch and Thor. As we find out a little more information, as is now imposter Blade goes on to further say, "I was there in old Atlantis. I was there transcribing the Darkhold and putting its bleak words onto paper. And now with the living Darkhold, or Scarlet Witch, and the blood of a god, or Thor, in my place of power, I can finally complete the ritual and become what I always wanted to be." As you see, him becoming a vampire was only the first step. It was only his pupil form. No, he was destined for something more, as you see him take a sip of some of Thor's blood, and because this is the blood of a thunder god, it powers him up even more. As you see, he was destined to be the end of all things. As he finally starts and tries to complete this ritual, drawing in the dark force itself, he is becoming one with the darkness, an entire dimension. He is going to become the darkness that consumes the light, the cold that consumes warmth. Yes, he is going to become a vampire, but one that instead of consuming normal people, objects, and animals for blood, he will consume entire planets, entire stars. He will become the unliving dark force, aka imagine Galactus, but instead if he was a giant vampire seeking to consume all life and light in the universe. But as his now imposter Blade is powering up, we then see something interrupt his now ritual, as he calls it, and it is none other than the giant moon, closer and bigger than it would seem normally, which shouldn't even be possible as a thick dark force fog is covering the earth, with even Blade going on to say it can't be. And what is this and what does this mean? Well, it has a connection to what the trio was doing in Asgard. As we move over and pick up in the streets of New York and across the entire world, as you see a bunch of different white portals open up, and a voice goes on a monologue saying, "In the darkness, light. That is what I am, and that is what I have always been. They know they are not alone, and my warriors are here with no fear, no blood, no mercy, and led by my resurrected son, my Moon Knight." As we see Mark Spector, the original Moon Knight, finally resurrected and back in action. As you might have been wondering, who was the trio trying to break out of that Asgardian prison? Well, it was none other than Khonshu, the moon deity that powers Moon Knight. And with him now free, Moon Knight and now this moon army are here to tip the sides in favor of the heroes. And with Blade distracted by the arrival of Moon Knight and his now moon army, T'Challa, the Black Panther, then decides this is his time to strike, as he takes out a spike from something and charges Blade with it. But of course his attempt is stopped relatively easily, with Blade basically going on to say, too little too late. Did you really think you can kill me with that little blade? But as it turns out, that wasn't Black Panther's intention at all. No, his attack was merely a distraction from the real threat just behind him. As you see Black Panther going on to say, no, not really, I was just removing it. As you see lightning crackle in the background, and Thor, the god of thunder, is finally up and ready for battle once more. With him going on to say, insult and injury I have suffered, and Thor will have his recompense. And just as Thor finished talking, we see another voice just arrive saying, which is just fancy talk for avenging, as we see the rest of the mighty Avengers arrive just in time to help Thor and put the beat on his now imposter Blade. But of course, Blade is not backing down, as he is now empowered even further with his vampire team behind him, going on to say, come then, come and face the unliving Dark Force, as this is gearing up to be one mighty battle, with the forces of the Avengers and Moon Knight and his now moon army fighting against his now unliving Dark Force Blade and his vampire army, while Dr. Doom in the back might become Sorcerer Supreme and any problems that may come with that. Immediately what we see and pick up is here at Latveria, where we see three people arguing. Doctor Strange, who his main body has been defiled and killed and turned into a vampire, so he is in his astral form, his wife Clea, and Dr. Doom. Because during this giant vampire invasion, Blade and his team covered the entire Earth with Dark Force energy, meaning no sunlight can get through, and it seems Dr. Doom is the only one that possesses the knowledge and is capable to turn the tides of darkness back. But there is one catch. He cannot do it without the title, mantle, and powers that come with it of Sorcerer Supreme, meaning for Dr. Doom to seemingly save the world and greater beyond, Doctor Strange has to give up his most powerful possession, his title, magic, and powers of being the Sorcerer Supreme. But here's where things get pretty interesting, as you see Doctor Strange congratulates Dr. Doom, as he says, well done. You've outmaneuvered me at last. But tell me this, did you engineer this entire crisis just for this one moment? As you see, what Doctor Strange is accusing Dr. Doom of is going behind the scenes orchestrating this entire invasion, causing chaos, mayhem, and the deaths of many innocents and even some heroes, just to get to this one point in time where he can claim the title of Sorcerer Supreme for whatever plans he may have. Which just goes to show you Dr. Doom is willing to do almost anything if it means seeing his vision and plans come to pass. But okay, moving over to the main battle and climax of this entire storyline, we see the Avengers finally regrouped, repowered, and with their members back, lead a final charge against a super vampire team, Blood Coven, and a super powered Blade. Well, I guess he's not really Blade, he's more of a possessed Blade, as Verne, the first ever vampire in Marvel Comics, has been possessing him. And not only that, after doing some kind of ritual and power up, he now possesses the entire power of the Dark Force within him, an entire dimension, elevating Blade from what he was to almost cosmic tier of power, which all in all just means the Avengers are in for one heck of a battle. And we immediately see this as these two super teams come head to head. But one battle that is more important and more interesting is the battle between Thor and Verne, or Blade. As you see, these two powerhouses had some kind of history, with Thor even going on to say, it's been over 1,000 years since you and I last met, as he reaches out to Mjolnir so he can start this battle. But as it would seem, Verne has thrown it so far in orbit that it will take a little time to get to him. But regardless, Thor isn't just Thor because of his hammer. No, he is Thor because he is the god of thunder. And with that, they leap towards each other to engage in a battle, as Blade says god to god. But as you see with the other Avengers, while yes, they are holding their own against the Blood Coven, they are still not invincible. As Vision is an example of this, as Bloodstorm 1 literally rips his arm off as he calls the Avengers weak, specifically saying their humanity and goodwill is what's preventing them from seizing victory. And back in the battle with Thor and Verne, we see Verne with the upper hand, Thor on the ground being covered by Verne's Dark Force energy tendrils, as this possessed Blade goes on to say, out of all the Avengers, he hates Thor the most, as he starts to monologue thinking he has victory in the palm of his hands. But unfortunately for Blade, this second of distraction is all it takes. As you know with the Avengers, if there's breath and a heartbeat left in their body, they are going to fight to the end. And so with that, Thor holds out his hand, lightning crackling from his fingertips, as Mjolnir itself rides into the battle, coming to Thor, empowering him even more, blasting Blade back. And while yeah, like I said before, without his hammer he is still powerful, regardless of that fact, with his hammer he becomes even stronger, as Thor, fully with his weapon now, is back into the battle. And as Thor is getting the upper hand in that battle, we then see the other Avengers still struggle with theirs, with Iron Man going on to ask Captain Marvel if she can just blast through the sky again to get some sun in. But it seems that is not a viable strategy anymore, as the dark force is too powerful, too thick. She couldn't even fly and penetrate through it even if she wanted to. But we do see a small victory for the heroes, as Vision is able to blast and kill one of the Blood Coven, because being super vampires, they are still vampires, meaning some of their biggest weakness is sunlight. And Vision being an android, he's able to absorb solar energy. But that blast used basically the last of it, meaning from now on, Vision himself might be dead weight. But fortunately for the Avengers, backup arrives. Backup in the form of Mark Spector, Moon Knight finally resurrected, coming in with his undead moon army. And while this is all good and the heroes can get all the help they need, unfortunately, and we may even see, this still won't even be enough. But regardless of the odds, we see the heroes still try, as Moon Knight jumps in, taking on Bloodstorm 1, saving Vision. And as he is down, vulnerable to an attack, unfortunately Vision drops the ball, as he is out of solar energy, so he is basically useless here. And because of this, we see another Blood Coven member come and wrap up the heroes, immobilizing not only Vision but Moon Knight as well. As it seems nothing right now can even go the hero's way, as we even see the rest of the Avengers try to gang up on Verne himself. But as it turns out, Verne is just too powerful. As Captain Marvel even says herself, nothing they do can even scratch him. Everything that they hit him with, the Dark Force just swallows. Well, why? Well, because he is drawing in the power of an entire dimension, the Dark Force dimension, which is tied to each universe. Meaning every second he is getting stronger, till eventually he will become a universal tier of power. And so as the Avengers keep fighting and getting tired and more damage, Blade or Verne gets stronger every second. So as of now, it is looking pretty bleak for our heroes. But maybe soon enough there will be a breakthrough that they'll need. As we finally cut back over to Doctor Doom, and see what he is doing during all of this, as we see Doctor Doom say and tell Doctor Strange, the Avengers have engaged Verne and his creatures. The moon god Khonshu is dispatching his dead moon army across the world to battle the vampires, but it will not be enough, as he tries to continue to convince Doctor Strange to give him the title and power of Sorcerer Supreme. And of course, as much as Doctor Strange wants to say no, he knows that things are dire. And if he doesn't act now with some sort of plan, the entire world, and soon to be universe itself, could be lost. So instead of making a big deal and saying no, he gives in, but under one condition, as he tells Victor that he wants his oath. He wants his word, that once the world is saved, he will return to him what is his, the title and power of Sorcerer Supreme. And as you know, Doom isn't a hero by any stretch of the word. He is a mass murderer, a deceiver, a dictator who wants to rule the world with an iron fist. But above all, Doom isn't a liar, and if he gives you his word in any type of situation, you will have his promise. And with that, Doctor Strange gives in, telling him very well, as much as his wife protests to this, as Doctor Strange begins to reach into his very soul, his very being, and pulls out some sort of energy, some sort of light, which he goes on to explain is a fragment of his own living soul. And to become Sorcerer Supreme, you must bond it to your own. And one of the reasons why this would even work is because currently, Doctor Strange is technically undead, with his main body being a vampire. So once Doctor Doom takes this fragment, the title and powers that be should transfer to him in an instant. And so with that, Doctor Doom takes it and consumes it. And after a bright flash of light, we then finally see and reveal Doctor Doom, the new Sorcerer Supreme. As Doctor Strange goes on to sarcastically say, "All hail the Sorcerer Supreme," no, Doom corrects him, saying no, all hail Doom, which this in and of itself should tell you what's really going on here. But moving on further, we then see Doom, or this new Sorcerer Supreme Doom, walk further into his castle, into some sort of dungeon, to further put his plans into action, as he says he has been preparing for this eventuality. As you see, while Doctor Doom himself is a super genius, he doesn't just use his genius in the form of technology and other science, but he himself taps into the realm of magic, which is something unique amongst other Marvel and even some DC geniuses. As mostly when you see your Batmans, your Iron Mans, your Reed Richards, yes, they are super intelligent and can come up with many different types of technology, but usually they don't tap into magic. A restriction that Doctor Doom doesn't hold himself back on. As you see, Doom is already proficient with magic, but now being the Sorcerer Supreme, he takes that notch and dials it up to 12, as he finally starts the process in reversing Blade's doing and changing the very world. But he can't finalize the process at this very moment, as he is waiting for one specific thing to happen. And coincidentally, while this is going on, we move back over to the Avengers, who are basically helpless in being defeated by Verne, continue to try and at least fight. As this now possessed Blade goes on to say, "I had only one weakness, Avengers, the girl, the bloodline, and she is not here." Basically saying it's over and he has won. his victory is almost ensured. But it seems he has spoke too soon, as he turns around and it is the daughter of Blade herself coming in, stabbing him through the chest with a sword. And what it would seem like his only one weakness, being his daughter, the girl, is here. But sadly, this alone isn't enough. As Verne goes on to say, it is too late. My possession of your father has gone on for too long. His body is just as much mine as it is his now. And while you are of his bloodline, you are not of mine. Meaning his one weakness of someone being his bloodline doesn't relate here. But just then, we then hear another voice behind them, as Spider-Man, specifically Miles Morales, comes in pushing the sword even further. And with this finally spells the end for Verne, as it would seem Miles himself fulfills the contract and title of being of his bloodline. Because throughout this entire event, going all the way back to issue 1, we saw that the only person that Blade, or Verne, turned into a vampire specifically was Miles. So while Miles isn't blood-related part of his bloodline, he is related in the sense of vampirism. And this is enough to finally weaken Verne's hold on Blade, and to the entire Dark Force energy. As we cut over to Dr. Doom, as this was the breakthrough he was looking for. As he says himself, Verne's concentration has been broken, his control has been shaken, and now I strike. As Dr. Doom and all the other magical beings he has prepared for this, put all of their energies together and start to reverse the planetary Dark Force energy surrounding the planet, reversing all of the black slop and sending it back into Blade himself. And while all of this is happening, the Scarlet Witch decides to exorcise Verne from Blade, casting the spirit of the first vampire out of Blade and entrapping him in some kind of chaos energy crystal. And with Verne finally being dealt with, that just leaves the body of Blade himself, who still has 2 giant stab wounds through his chest and is bleeding out, dying on the floor. But it seems the Daywalker isn't dead just yet, as the Avengers, specifically Iron Man, says he isn't going to be able to heal him, but it is going to be a nasty scar. And with this, it seems things are finally looking up for the Avengers and heroes. As Sam Wilson, Captain America, goes on to say, the rest of the Blood Coven, or at least the ones that survived anyway, took off screaming as soon as Blade went down. And of course, with Verne under control and captured, and Blade being stabilized, it seems all of the supervillains and vampires have been dealt with. And with Captain Marvel flying up to check, she goes on to say she doesn't know if it's anything that they have done, or if it was what Strange had done, but it seems the Dark Force is receding. They had finally won. They had saved the day, as the light of the now uncovered sun shines through. But then this begs a question. Have they really saved the day? Was it really their actions that have done anything significant? Well, we see the answer to that question as we move back over to Doom and Doctor Strange. As of course, with the plan being successful and the vampires successfully defeated and the Dark Force reversed, Doctor Strange then requests for Victor to keep his word, to return to him the mantle and power of Sorcerer Supreme. But it seems like always, Dr. Doom has found a loophole and has ulterior motives. Because as he goes back to re-say his oath that he has promised to Doctor Strange to surrender the power of Sorcerer Supreme back once he has saved the world, he has revealed the loophole here. That yeah, he will do it in return to power, he has just only begun saving the world in his own eyes. And Doom does nothing halfway, as he lifts his hand, dispelling the spirit of Strange, and possibly even finally killing him. As his body is already undead, and now with Dr. Doom dispelling his spirit, it finally cements him as a Sorcerer Supreme and no one else to take claim. As Dr. Doom further goes on to say, now let me show you what it truly means to save the world. But moving over into the actual world and the heroes, we then see the vampires seemingly not affected by the sun. And why is this? Well, it's not explicitly clear whether it was because of the actions of Verne as Blade or because of the magic of Dr. Doom. But for now, all we know is anybody that was a vampire can now walk straight into the sunlight without being killed. And we also see that anyone that was a vampire before still is a vampire now, including Spider-Man, which, I mean, I don't really know how to feel about this, because Miles already has extra powers as it is, being a spider person with his invisibility and electricity, and now on top of that, he is also a vampire now. I just don't know. But I guess it could be interesting depending on what they do with it. But before the Avengers can plan even more to save the rest of the world, suddenly there is a worldwide broadcast going on to every screen on the planet. And as Iron Man holds his gauntlet up, he then plays a projection. As a voice on the projection goes on to say, the vampire threat is finally over, and this world, our world, is safe once more. And you only have but one man to thank, Earth's new Sorcerer Supreme, Victor Von Doom. As the Avengers stand awestruck, looking and now realizing what this means. Dr. Doom as a Sorcerer Supreme, one of the most powerful people not only on Earth, but in the universe, is getting ready to enact his own will upon the Earth. And with that, we come to the end of this video. So yeah, that was the entire Marvel Bloodhunt event. And while I thought it was pretty interesting at some points and had some interesting themes, the main things and most interesting thing to note here anyway is Doctor Doom becoming Sorcerer Supreme, not only elevating himself to a higher tier of power, but a new tier of influence, as he is now going to change the world forcefully, if you may, to his will. But of course, if you have enjoyed this video and this entire series, leave a like, or even subscribe if you enjoy this type of content on the channel. Now, this was the Hero Informer, and thank you for watching.